Welcome to the Impossible Shift Moments. So, as I promised you, I'm going to be going live while I'm building up all the channels. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to continue talking about the book, The Impossible Shift. So we are discussing chapter one, which is Seeds of Invisibility. So in case, and I've got my little small Kindle version right here. So in the beginning, obviously, I'm still in the character of Kathy, and I'm talking about how I used to like my hair put up, and I think there's something interesting about that. It wasn't just that I liked my hair to be put up. I didn't like my hair in my face, and I still don't to this day. So as you can see, my hair is not in my face. And I also didn't, particularly care for my curly hair at the time. So it made a lot of sense to just put it in a ponytail and be done with it. So that was kind of a thing that I would do. And so obviously in the first little bit, I say I am whatever you think I am. And I genuinely meant that when I said it, and I mean it now. And the reason why it's, I'm not going to say easy to say that, but the reason why that is something that was said was because too often we place a lot of value on what other people think about us. And so what happens is when you place more value on what other people think of you than on your own internal compass, you lose value in yourself. And it's not that you actually lose the value, it's that what happens is you believe that the value is lost. You believe the value is lost because of how the others are treating you. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where your value decreases as your belief that your value has decreased. So when I said I am whatever you think I am, what I was trying to tell you is the my opinion of myself is going to come from inside of myself and in who I am and in the relationships that I've built with the people that are closest to me. It's not going to come from external validation, basically. So, and then, goes into, you know, talking about beauty standards, and why I believed that people saw me as beautiful. And I go into a scene about when I was 10 years old. And so the thing about that scene that, I think I didn't really get to capture in the book in the way that I probably would have wanted to is that I had choices all the way up to that moment with those boys in that playground. And they may not have been the most comfortable of choices, but they were choices nonetheless, right? So, I'm there with my mom. She's telling me that she's pregnant. I'm so upset. I leave the house. And that's how I find myself outside. And that's how, I'm wandering around, and that's how I find myself in the playground. But, you know, um, I could have stayed and listened to her and let her help me understand, if she was willing to help me understand why she had made the choice that she made. I think that could have ended up being a really good moment. But we don't live in the past. We don't live with regrets. We don't live with what ifs. and things that could have been. We move forward into the path of our future based on the things that actually did happen and how we can learn and grow from those things and not the possible scenarios that we could have taken. Now we can use those possible scenarios that we could have taken as learning opportunities, right? And so instead, if you find yourself in an eerily similar situation, you can say, do would I rather be here or there in this moment? And then you adjust yourself accordingly. Right. So I see these group of boys, they're from my elementary school. There's like five of them. And off in the distance, I see some of my friends. It's like three of them. They were over on like the monkey bars, just kind of hanging out. And I thought about just going and walking up to them and just hanging out with them. But there was this moment where I just froze in, I don't know, it was like fear, shock, all like frustration, like I cannot believe this is happening right now. And they were barely a glimmer of a thought at the time. And you know um could things have been different if I chose to walk towards them instead of standing still and letting those boys come to me? I don't know. They may have still come anyway. Those are one of those things where you don't know. It's a scenario that didn't happen, so it's hard to project and assume. But when you think about what the possibilities were or how you could possibly handle things differently, moving into the future, you ask yourself those kinds of questions. What could I have done differently? What situation could have prevented this? And it's something that I think happens often with victims. They find themselves, playing to the scenario, trying to think, is there something that I could have done differently? And it's unfortunate. And while I don't like to consider myself a victim, I know at that moment I was being victimized. And so, call it what you want. But they came and they surrounded me on the playground, and they made me feel so small and so trapped and so isolated from everything. Like suddenly the friends, the girls were so far away, but they actually hadn't moved, right? They were still on those monkey bars, but they seemed like they were miles and miles away. I felt so utterly and completely and unbearably alone. And then, they just played their game. To them it was a game. They thought it was a game. Uh, they just started touching me everywhere that they wanted to. And no one said anything. And as this was going on, I found myself becoming angrier and angrier and angrier. Like this thing just getting ready to explode from this rage that's kind of building up, building it deep inside of you. And you are suddenly overflowing with this negative emotion. And, you know, I talk a little bit about, people saying, did you see what Mary had that little girl dressed in? She's just asking for trouble. I put that as a commentary because it's It's much easier to blame the victim than it is to hold the perpetrator accountable. Uh, that is the reality that we live in today. And maybe one day it will change. I think um, part of why it doesn't is because there are some who villainize it and use these tools at their disposal, I suppose, as weapons when they're actually not meant for that purpose. They're meant for the person that is being victimized to have a chance for justice. So when you have some situations like that, it becomes skewed, it becomes um, polarized, it becomes, well, how did you let this happen? And it's a natural instinct, right? And it's not even just with with victimization. It happens all the time, right? So think about it with your if you have children, your teenage kid, if they get into a car accident, even if it wasn't their fault, right? You're gonna be like, how did you let this happen? Oh, someone hit me from behind. What was I supposed to do? I was at a stoplight, right? So, as we think about that, food for thought, I know there will be some of you who will disagree, and that is okay. You can disagree. It doesn't make what I'm saying any less valid. It just means that you are in a different place than I am. So that's all. And I don't think that we all always have to be on the same page. I mean, that's part of what makes the world and society beautiful is we have different ideas and different perspectives and different understandings. Uh, but what makes it even better is when we can share those different ideas and different expectations and different understandings in a way that isn't harmful, in a way that helps us to grow and to evolve and to gain a larger view of our understanding of the world and those around us. So that's part of the reason why I share with you the things that I share with you. So now they were there, they surrounded me, no one stopped me. They'd say boys would be boys. No, you've heard it. And so, I was like, yeah, I guess this is my fault that they're doing this. And I was really mad about it. I was really, really mad at it. I was really mad about it. And I wanted them to stop. I wanted them to stop so badly that I think I started seeing colors, just rage, blind rage. And and knowing that, like, and it was all like a culmination. It wasn't just that moment with those boys, but it was knowing that my mom made me a promise to leave the projects, and I believed her, and I had believed her so much. I boasted about it to, like, everybody that would listen. I told everybody how we were leaving. We were moving on up, right, to the east side. And then this wish y'all the news. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not grateful for my sister. I love my sister. I think she is a treasure. But at the time, I did not want her around. I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but I was just like, whatever that baby is, it's got to go. We can't stay here. We need to move, right? So I had dealings with those feelings of betrayal because promises were broken, promises were made, and promises were broken. And I'm too young to understand that it's complex, right? Maybe they didn't plan on getting pregnant. I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just thinking, you ruined my life. And now I'm out here and they're ruining my life. And everyone is this villain and I'm tired of it. I'm not going to put up with it anymore. So, all this betrayal I felt, um, I I couldn't believe it. So I was just like beside myself, right? And I knew they were there. And I knew that it was going to happen. I knew I was too late. I knew that my furious rage that I had felt at my mother for this betrayal that I believed I was experiencing was an indictment on everything that I held dear, on everything that I had committed myself to, that I committed my life to, that I told everyone that I was going to do. And you know, it was it was one of those things where I wonder if she had regretted telling me after she told me. Like after she heard like my response, because my response was very bad. Uh, did she, at some point in time, say to herself, maybe I should have waited to tell her, or maybe I shouldn't have told her until we were sure that the pregnancy was viable, or, I don't know. I think, though, that a part of her had genuinely expected me to rejoice with her. And I think that, looking back, that probably would have been the right thing to do. So, but again, it's not what I did. So I can't go back and say, well, let's just rewind the clock and let me be grateful that you did this. Because really, what would have happened, even if I had feigned happiness for her, it might have come across like, well, I'm so glad that we get to live in the project for the rest of our lives. I was a kid. I was short sighted. I didn't realize that at one point I would take myself out. I thought that if she didn't take us out, we would never leave and that would be our forever. And it was a temporary situation, but it was still a situation nonetheless. It was still a situation where I now had to admit some hard truths that I was not quite prepared for. These truths that were just staring me in the face that there was going to be another mouth to feed. There was going to be it was going to be a long, long time before we got to walk through that neighborhood as strangers instead of residents. And so when I saw those boys and I knew they would play their games, I froze. And I froze because I think my mind wasn't ready for what was coming. My mind wasn't ready for what was before me, what was laying, right there in front. And it was not ready for the onslaught that it was going to experience. And all I knew at that moment was that I made a mistake. I should have stayed at the house and argued about the baby. But we all make mistakes, don't we? And when we make our mistakes and we can own them, we grow just a little bit, but it's enough. There's some people that believe that our lives are like seeds and we plant them and we water them and we feed them, and what we plant, what we water and feed them is what they grow into. I like that. I think it's beautiful. uh it's not exactly what I subscribe to, but I do like it for what it represents, and uh, how beautiful of a message it is. Because if you feed it garbage, it's going to end up being garbage, and if you feed it, beautiful things, it's going to end up beautiful. And that's a beautiful it's a beautiful philosophy, to be honest. Obviously, my philosophy is centered around choice. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about impossible shifts and how to make them, and why these moments in the book matter, and why they tell you a little bit more about what these choices are supposed to look like, right? Because when we think about our choices, we don't see them as having any power or any significance. We see them as just a thing that we do. But the reality is our choices are one of the most powerful things that we have in this life, because they shape who we become more than anything else. Our choices. So we can have tons of things go through our life. Horrible. But when we have our choices, I mean, when we are able to use freely our choices, it changes everything, because your choice is your power. It's where your strength lies. It's where you are the maker and the creator of the path in your future that you want to go down. And the the way that I like to describe the idea behind choice is pretty simple, and you may hear this more than once, and if you do, that just means you've listened to me more than once because I say it a lot. Which is, I mean, that's okay, right? um so so when we think about our choice, we understand how science works, right? So we know that there's a cause and then effect. So when there's an action that takes place, there is something that happens. So a causation, right? I'll call it a consequence to make it easier, but you can call it causation, you can call it effect, you can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to call it consequence to keep it simple. Okay. So you have a choice and you have a consequence. Now, the consequence can be good or the consequence can be bad. It really depends on the choice, the action that was made, in the same way of cause and effect, right? Something is done and then something happens. So when you say something like, I choose heads, you have a coin in your hand and you flip it, the time it takes for it to hit back into your palm is the time for that consequence. Okay? The cause, the effect. So when you look in your palm, you now have your answer to that choice that you made. That is considered a very small choice. So you got the results very quickly. Now, choices are not all created equal, right? Some choices take longer to reach consequence because of the, different variables, um, because of the size and the gravity of it. It sometimes, long time. So some people call this karma. Karma is the act of, this is going to come back to you eventually. It is going to come back to you eventually because that is just the nature of the law of, of our world that we live in. You perform an action, which is your choice, and there is an equal and opposite reaction, which is your consequence. So whether you receive your consequence immediately or you receive it over a long period of time, there is going to be, it's going to happen. Okay, we can call it whatever we want to call it. You saw I gave you multiple words to use to say the same thing. I'm not trying to tell you how to speak because that's not what we're here for. You can call it karma if you want to call it karma. You can call it causation if you want to call it causation. But the reality is when you make a choice, you are performing an action, and that action will result in a consequence. And so, just like my choice when I was 10 years old to flee my house because I was so upset at my mother and found myself in the playground, that was an action that had a consequence. Now, what happened after that is a different story. I'm not talking about the blaming myself for the victimization. I'm talking about finding myself there in front of those, right? Still not my fault what happened. Those were their actions at that point. And they had consequences, which we'll talk about next week. So I don't want to get too far ahead, right? But my actions brought me to that moment, and their actions took it too far. So um, This is what we're talking about, cause and effect. And so the the only way for you to start to experience the the life that you want, or the life that you have been waiting for, is for you to recognize how important and how impactful your choices are. Because when you have your choices and you are making your decisions based on, you're making your choices, you're leading yourself down the path that you want to go to, or leading yourself down the path that you don't want to go to. I don't know how you're going to use your choices. I do know that it's very easy to give up your choices. Hmm. Yes, we do that a lot. But I will leave it there. It has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you sometime next Saturday. Can't promise when, so just stick around. Eventually, I'll get into a rhythm as we grow and I see what time makes the most sense. But right now, I'm going to work off of my schedule and what's most convenient for me, because you can just watch it later. Um, but I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.